All right, welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee, Wednesday, February 18th. We will start with our former colleague, former committee colleague, Delegate Terrassa, HB 517, Emission Standards, Ambient Air Quality Standards, and Solid Waste Management Local Authority. For the panel, please bring them up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 panel members here. Just bring up a chair. Yeah, just pull up a chair. We're good. All right. It's good to be back again. Just a moment of personal privilege. I just want the committee to say hi to my mom, who's here. She's right here. She's with the pink hair. This is the first time she's ever come to see me at work in 20 years. So, so it's just because of you guys. All right. So this is House Bill 517. Good afternoon, Chair Corman and Vice Chair Guyton and members of the ENT Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jen Terrassa, and I thank you for this opportunity to present House Bill 517, reaffirming Local Environmental Authority Act. This is a reintroduction of last year's bill, House Bill 1058. The bottom line is this. Nearly 50 years ago, both state and federal law, for nearly 50 years, I should say, both state and federal law have made it clear that local jurisdictions are empowered to set environmental standards for both water and air quality as long as they are more stringent than state and federal law. Unfortunately, more recently, some courts have questioned whether this was actually the intent of the General Assembly, and this has led to costly litigation and has discouraged local jurisdictions from enacting environmental legislation to improve water and air quality and protect the health of its residents. So this bill is simple. It merely clarifies that the Maryland General Assembly's intent was to allow local governments to adopt their own air waste ordinances, and as long as they're no less strict than federal and state. Last year, we warned of the possibility that federal environmental standards would be altered or nullified during the Trump administration, and unfortunately, we've seen that come to pass. It's become clear we cannot trust the federal government to be the stewards of our environment, and given this current situation and our current environmental challenges, now more than ever, we should encourage local jurisdictions to create stricter environmental standards and ensure that they feel confident in their ability to do so. House Bill 517 makes our intent clear, and I respectfully urge a favorable report.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mike Ewall. I'm the Executive Director of Energy Justice Network, a national organization, and I'm the author of this bill. And I would like to start by just pointing out that the Federal Clean Air Act, the Federal Resource Recovery and Conservation Act, which is our solid waste law at the federal level, both explicitly say that states and their political subdivisions can have laws of their own in these areas that are as strict or stricter than the federal minimums. Maryland takes advantage of that in some ways and also has a state law that says that local governments can be stricter. However, some of that wording is a little unfortunate. For example, one area where it says section instead of subsection. And because of those 3 missing letters, there have been court battles where they say, well, the state law that says you can do this actually says you can't, which clearly was not the legislature's intent. So this bill is just to clarify the legislature's intent from decades ago. One of the common pushbacks that you'll hear, if you do at all, from any industry interests is that it will create a crazy patchwork of local laws that all have different requirements. Well, if that were true, I think we would have seen it by now, because these laws have been on the books for roughly 50 years, and we don't see a crazy patchwork that has crushed industry everywhere and it disabled the economy. So this is just basically affirming what we thought we already had, making sure that local governments have that power without having to cringe before developers that they might find reasonable regulations are appropriate for, and be worried that they're going to lose in court if they say, well, we want you to monitor for this pollutant if you're going to build a smokestack in our town, that sort of thing. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Charlotte Fleckenstein, Legislative Services Assistant with MACO, testifying today in support of House Bill 517. First and foremost, we very much appreciate the support here in clarifying local authority to regulate their own outdoor air quality standards. We are very grateful to the sponsor for introducing this bill. Aside from being an important and necessary clarification, it is just a really smart, strong piece of environmental legislation, and as such, MACO is respectfully urging a favorable report on House Bill 517. Thank you.
Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, my name is Tyler Bryce, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Municipal League. We respectfully offer our strong support for House Bill 517. As my colleague said before, this bill is about clarity, partnership, and local empowerment for our governments. This legislation reaffirms and clarifies that political subdivisions retain the authority to adopt local ordinances, rules, or regulations related to emission standards, ambient air quality, and solid waste management. I don't want to take too much of your time because my colleagues have already expressed everything. So thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Delegate Terrassa, is Kurt Schwarz on your panel as well, the virtual witness?
Is he here?
He's virtual. Is he on your panel?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
That's fine, yes.
Mr. Schwarz, you ready?
Okay, can you all hear me?
Could you try to speak up a little louder, actually?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Can you all hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Environment Committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to testify. My name is Kurt Schwarz. I live in Columbia, Maryland in District 13. I wholeheartedly support HB 517. I think it is imperative that counties and local jurisdictions be able to protect the air they breathe as the federal government rolls back air quality standards. I back this bill because of the plans of W.R. Grace to build a pilot plastic recycling project on its campus in Columbia. Excuse me, plastic recycling is an oxymoron. It does not produce usable amounts of plastic, but rather highly toxic and low-grade fuels, and a lot of waste to include highly volatile organic compounds. If this project is approved, other chemical companies are interested in opening similar facilities in Maryland. I live in a 55-plus community that is less than 3 miles south-southeast of Grace and downwind. Most of us are over 65, which is a risk factor in and of itself. Many of us also have heart or lung conditions that volatile organic compounds will aggravate. There are 8 other senior citizen facilities within a 3-mile radius of Grace and 20 schools. Residential homes are located immediately adjacent to the fence at Grace. Grace and other subsequent plastic recycling projects present a threat to the health of all of us, and especially children and seniors. I urge the committee to issue a favorable report, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegate, her mom, or the panel? Okay, looks like no questions, so thank you, delegate. Thanks for the bill. Great to see you back in ENT. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 517. We'll turn to House Bill 578, Delegate Polakovich-Carr, Fish and Wildlife, Endangered and Threatened Species and Migratory Birds, Regulation Lists, Petitions, Essential Habitats, and Takings. If you have a panel, please bring them up.
Yes, my panel is welcome to join me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 578. This bill is a direct response to federal attacks on 2 of our nation's foundational environmental laws, the Endangered Species Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. These federal laws have long histories of bipartisan support. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act was signed into law more than 100 years ago. More than 50 years ago, President Richard Nixon signed the Endangered Species Act into law to protect the most rare animals, fish, and plants in America. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan signed an expansion of the act, and it was his administration that drafted and finalized additional rules that strengthened the ESA, and many of those Reagan-era rules are still in effect today. Collectively, this patchwork of policies has been successful, with hundreds of species saved from extinction and the full recovery of iconic species like the bald eagle, grizzly bears, and humpback whales. But that might not be the case for much longer. The Trump administration has put forth draft rules to strip crucial protections from the Endangered Species Act. The proposed rules would remove safeguards for threatened species and make it harder to designate critical habitat for listed species, among other changes. These are not idle threats by the current administration. During President Trump's first term, they finalized many of these same rules, which were then reversed by the Biden administration. The Trump administration has also issued a legal opinion that significantly weakens the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act. This policy change gives a free pass to heavy industries like mining that don't directly and immediately kill birds, but rather harm the health or reproduction of birds. This doesn't need to be a race to the bottom. Federal laws and regulations set the minimum floor for protections for biodiversity. States can supersede the federal requirements to be more protective. Now that the federal government is lowering the floor, states don't have to follow suit. We can take action and pass a state law to codify the existing federal protections before they are undone. For example, 18 other states protect migratory birds from both direct and indirect harm, as is proposed in this bill. HB 578 simply preserves several policies the federal government has used for years. As I previously mentioned, many of the ESA rules date back to the Reagan administration, and the protections against incidental takings of migratory birds date back to the 1970s. Beyond codifying the existing federal protections, the bill also takes proactive steps to conserve habitat. This bill would allow, but not require, the Secretary of Natural Resources to designate areas as essential habitat for protected species. 10 states have similar laws. The bill also updates a 2022 law sponsored by Delegate Stein that created the Irreplaceable Natural Areas Program to preserve biodiversity on state-owned lands. It's a great program, and I want to thank Delegate Stein for his leadership on that. This bill just clarifies that DNR has the ability to add or remove areas from the program over time. Now, there are a lot of technical details in the bill that I realize I am glossing over completely at the moment, but I'm of course happy to answer the committee's questions about any provisions in the bill and what their origins are in federal regulations. I do have several sponsor amendments forthcoming. You can expect the following. One, an amendment from the Farm Bureau to clarify that the bill does not impact their existing federal permit to prevent depredation of livestock by black vultures. 2, from DNR to clarify about implementation of essential habitat designation. And 3, from the Maryland Ornithological Society to clean up the language on protections for migratory birds. In conclusion, as a trained wildlife biologist, I am deeply concerned about what is happening at the federal level in terms of environmental conservation. But I remain hopeful that Maryland will continue to operate under the same policies and the same protections that the nation has for decades. HB 578 would ensure that that remains the case. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and members of the committee. My name is Mariam Tabrizi, and I'm a long-time Maryland resident, and I'm a policy volunteer with Humane World for Animals, formerly the Humane Society of the United States, here to speak in support of House Bill 578. Humane World has provided written support, but I wanted to briefly highlight 3 key points. As the delegate mentioned, federal protections of vulnerable animals, plants, and habitats are often in flux. And in the recent effort at the federal level to weaken or roll back protections makes it more difficult to list species in need and often opens loopholes to undermine protections. So Maryland needs to be proactive here. Second, the bill will ensure decisions in Maryland are based on science, sound ecological and biological criteria, not political influence. Habitat is often the #1 reason why species go extinct, and House Bill 578 would allow the designation of essential habitats for threatened and endangered species in places in Maryland such as wooded forest to our coastal marshes. And finally, the bill will strengthen the humane economy. Wildlife watching, such as observing and photographing, is a growing part of the Maryland economy, including travel, sale of goods and services, and actually even employment. So let's be proactive to ensure the biodiversity in Maryland, to protect Maryland's wild world, and ensure healthy ecosystems. Please support House Bill 578. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jim Brown. I'm with Audubon Mid-Atlantic. Audubon Mid-Atlantic is the regional office of the National Audubon Society. We have 35,000 members in Maryland who advocate for the protection of birds, the places they need to survive, both for today and tomorrow. This is the type of bill that National Audubon Society is very excited about, given the federal rollbacks to protections of birds during the first Trump administration and now during the second Trump administration. For Maryland to be seen as a leader in conservation, it's important to step up and make the protection of birds a priority when the federal government continues to roll back key provisions of the Migratory Bird Treaty Agreement, which has already been mentioned, the Endangered Species Act, and continued attacks on clean water, settled precedent throughout the United States and Maryland. So this bill gives a chance for Maryland to say Maryland will not allow that to happen. Maryland's going to continue to be a leader in protecting birds and the places that they need to survive. Real quickly, we know that 1/3 of all birds in Maryland are under significant threat. There's been millions of birds lost in Maryland over recent decades, and enacting this bill will enable Maryland to continue to protect birds and not let this severe bird loss continue. Right now, under the current rollbacks that happened at the federal level, if there was an oil spill in the Chesapeake Bay, there would be no measure at all to protect birds or hold those responsible for the spill to clean up the mess and protect birds through the provisions of the MBTA. As has already been mentioned, what this bill simply does is it brings the protections that existed at the MBTA level to Maryland so that industries that are doing business in Maryland are required to protect birds and the places they need to survive. So Audubon Mid-Atlantic enthusiastically supports this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cool bill. My question, does the bill just pertain to birds?
No, it is any type of living organism that qualifies for protections under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is birds, or the Endangered Species Act. So that could be animals, plants, fish, insects, et cetera.
So it could include wolves and coyotes if they were considered endangered species?
If they qualified, yes. I mean, they don't currently in Maryland.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So did you read the letter from NAIOP?
I did.
So some of their concerns are some of my concerns, specifically on the economic impacts are not they're being explicitly prohibited from this, from DNR, considering any possible economic or other impacts, and a blanket protection of migratory birds. On the last bullet point there, I mean, their list is pretty clear. I mean, there are some of my concerns there. Are your amendments going to be dealing with any of those bullet points?
Respectfully, no. Their testimony, unfortunately, was rife with factual errors. So I think perhaps this is maybe outside of the area of law that respectfully our builders often work in. So many of the things that they are pointing to as quote unquote being new things are the case right now under federal regulations. So for instance, that economic impacts provision that you just cited, that is the law of the land in America at this moment. There are regulations that have been put forward by the current presidential administration to delete those, but that provision about not considering economic impacts does date back to 1984 when the Reagan administration put those regulations into place, and they have stood the test of time until the first Trump administration, and then were put back in place. So that is currently what the standard is across America right now.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill, and thanks to your panel. Happen to have an important migratory bird stop in my neighborhood, Patterson Park. Hundreds of birds stop there. So thank you for the bill. I just wanted to make sure I heard the amendments that are coming forward. Would you mind repeating those? And these are friendly amendments that you're considering?
Yes, they will be part of my sponsor amendments. The first one addresses the informational testimony from the Farm Bureau. Currently, farmers have a federal permit to address, or to take is the legal term, black vultures that are interfering with livestock operations in the state. The intention with the bill is not to undermine or prevent that existing federally permitted activity here in Maryland. So we're just going to make that clear in the bill that that can continue. DNR has asked for some clarification in the two sections of the bill that have to do with habitat, essential habitat designation, and really just clarifying that they can follow up through regulations in order to implement the language in the bill. And then the third amendment, I'll be honest, drafting error, but as the bill sponsor, I'm going to take full ownership of that. No shade on our excellent staff in DLS. The section on migratory bird provisions, protections was not drafted quite to my intentions, and in the written testimony from the Ornithological Society, they pointed out what the language actually should be and what we were modeling it off of from another state.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Lewis, I think we're all surprised you did not ask about bats just now. Vice Chair Guyton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very, very much for bringing this bill again. I have two questions, Mr. Chair, if that's okay. First one's quick. We've heard at least parts of this bill before in the past. I've always been impressed by what you were trying to do. Can you tell us the history of what's happened to this legislation over the past several years? Because I believe that, I know personally I've supported it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I did have a bill, I think it was 2 sessions ago, that did touch on our state's Endangered Species Act. We did pass that one. That one got put into law. So this is actually new changes, and I would say new threats, responding really to what's going on at the federal level. So this is, I don't think anything in this bill has been before this committee in recent years.
Okay, thank you for that. I was going to go back and look at the last bill because I thought we had passed it and just wanted to make sure. So the other question I have, because you were the person, I think, in this body who taught me the importance of declaring legislative intent. And how important that can be. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to do that again on one of the issues brought up by our friends at NAOP. Number one, the expansion of the definition of harm to include habitat modification or degradation, even if no individual animal is affected. Could you say a little bit more about that and what your legislative intent is in including that in the bill, or whether that is also a misunderstanding of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The definition of harm that's in the bill is word for word already in regulations. So it has already been adopted by a DNR in COMAR regulations. We are just codifying that existing definition of harm. So that really, that section of the bill is not a change for Maryland. We already do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's really helpful to hear that these are not all new changes that are being presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think we have one more in-person witness, Maggie Ostall from the National Aquarium.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you to this committee for your work on so many critical issues, and thank you to Delegate Polakovich-Carr for sponsoring this bill. I'm Maggie Ostall. I'm the Director of Conservation Policy for the National Aquarium. One of our 3 overarching priorities is to save wildlife and habitats. We take a holistic, solutions-focused approach that includes in-building and online education about the importance of threatened and endangered species, community-based wildlife recovery and habitat restoration projects, and collaboration with the Department of Natural Resources and many others to restore critical habitats and to protect Maryland's rare, threatened, and endangered species. It is well established that we are living through a biodiversity crisis, and the loss of plants and animals also means the loss of valuable ecosystem services we all depend on, such as pollination, food web regulation, and more. HB 578 takes an appropriate precautionary approach that codify many existing effective state regulations, define or clarify important terms, and authorize designation of essential habitat, especially important since habitat loss is the main driver of species extinction. The ESA, the Endangered Species Act, has been incredibly effective in preventing species from becoming extinct while contributing significantly to species recovery. The Endangered Species Act also has extremely broad public support. While the federal government continues to pursue actions that weaken protections for threatened and endangered species, the state can and must enact safeguards, and this bill does just that. The National Aquarium urges the committee to issue a favorable report, on HB 578. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions, so we'll turn to our virtual favorite witnesses. We have Kurt Schwarz from the Maryland Ornithological Society.
On mute. Okay. Hello. Hello again. My name is Kurt. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Kurt Schwarz, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Ornithological Society. It's a volunteer organization of 2,500 members throughout the state with 15 chapters dedicated to the study, enjoyment, and conservation of birds and their habitats. I am the Conservation Chair Emeritus for MOS. MOS supports HB 0578 as it would provide protections to our birds that were previously guaranteed under the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. In January 2025, the Department of Interior overturned a half-century of precedent and would no longer protect birds from incidental take of birds, the unintentional killing of birds by such things as oil spills, power lines, poorly sited wind turbines, and brightly illuminated buildings. HB 0578 would restore protections from incidental take to our birds in Maryland. Our birds are in steep decline. A landmark study in 2019 showed that we had lost 30% of our birds since 1970, and those declines continue. Passage of HB 578 would help stem those losses in Maryland and help reverse the negative trend in our bird populations. I refer you please to our written testimony, which was drafted by our Conservation Chair, Robin Todd, who is unable to testify today. We respectfully ask that the committee issue a favorable report on HB 0578, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to Lisa Radoff, Maryland Votes for Animals. Please go ahead.
Hello, I'm sorry, my video was not on. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Lisa Radoff. I'm the President and Chair of Maryland Votes for Animals in support of HB 578. You have already heard from a lot of experts, not the least of whom is our sponsor, Delegate Polakovich-Carr, who is a biologist and probably could do a class on this as well as a legislator. As you have heard, HB 578 is about keeping our wildlife strong, our laws strong, current, and effective. The proposed legislation builds on federal regulations that have been around for many years to reflect current scientific knowledge and evolving environmental conditions, reducing the risk of outdated or ineffective rules. I'll cut to the chase. HB 578 modernizes our approach, improves clarity, and supports responsible conservation, grounded in science as well as regular review. I'd like to thank Delegate Polakovich-Carr for sponsoring this legislation and ask the committee for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 578. We'll turn to House Bill 663, Delegate Professor Rosenberg, Department of the Environment, Federal Policy on Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reporting. And if you have a panelist, bring them up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Not every proposed change in federal regulatory policy is going to get the attention that the recent decision by the current administration undoing the protection from greenhouse gases, it's in greenhouse gas emissions, undoing that protection as an endangered under the endangerment provision of federal law. That was front page, top of the fold news. Not every decision, such decision, which is harmful to the environment in the view of the overwhelming view of the medical community and the scientific community, is going to get that kind of attention. So the purpose of House Bill 663, which was prompted by the reports that this decision was being proposed within the Environmental Protection Agency, gets that kind of publicity. But under this bill, the Maryland Department of the Environment would be required every 6 months to report on changes to the federal regulatory process that have been upheld by a federal court, that this legislature would be notified so that we could then participate appropriately in the review of Maryland law and Maryland regulations to see if any change was needed in response to the federal decisions. As an alumnus, fellow alumnus of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Chairman, you would know there are ways to accomplish this goal other than by a bill. The committee can send a letter putting the department on notice that you want to be notified. The bottom line is that there needs to be communication between the legislative branch and the executive branch to respond appropriately to protect our environment when the federal government is on the verge of taking actions that are harmful to our environment. And with me here today is are you still the other Jeremy Baker? I think so. Who is with the head of government affairs for the Department of the Environment, and also teaches amendment drafting to a certain legislation class at both law schools.
Thank you, Delegate. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, Jeremy D. Baker on behalf of the Department of the Environment, here in support of House Bill 663. I want to thank Delegate Rosenberg for bringing the bill and for working with us over the interim to refine it. The EPA's 2009 greenhouse gas emissions endangerment finding establishes the legal basis for regulating greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act. The EPA signaled over the summer their intention to reconsider the endangerment finding, and as Delegate Rosenberg said, last week announced that they are moving forward with a rulemaking that would repeal it. Various environmental groups have already committed to challenging the rulemaking. While the endangerment finding is specific to greenhouse gas emission standards for mobile sources, meaning vehicles, the EPA has indicated it is reconsidering other policies that depend on the endangerment finding on a case-by-case basis, including regulations on methane. Accordingly, similar endangerment findings that provide the legal basis for regulating emissions from power plants, oil and gas operations, and aircraft could also be in jeopardy. This issue presents a complicated legal question that could be tied up in court for years. I think it's important to highlight a similar situation that we found ourselves in a couple of years ago based on the implications of the Supreme Court's 2023 ruling in Sackett versus EPA, which was related to the Waters of the United States rule. In Sackett, the court narrowed the scope of the Clean Water Act. In response to that, in 2024, this General Assembly passed the Clean Water Justice Act, which allowed for certain citizen suits in state court that were lost at the federal level due to the Sackett decision. In summary, HB 663 would be a good tool for the legislative and executive branches to track the litigation and the resulting impacts and to work together on the state's response. Accordingly, MDE asked for a favorable report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Delegate Stein.
There we go. Okay. I was just saying, I certainly appreciate and very much understand the intent behind your bill. I guess I've got two questions. First is, and as maybe you or Jeremy implied, almost everything at the regulatory level that's being undone is being challenged in court, and it may be a few years before the Supreme Court makes a final decision. Would this bill envision updates on those regulations that have been undone and they're still being subject to challenge? And I guess my second question is, why not include congressional action? Because though, for example, changes made through the big bill last year, those are final. And certainly many of them have had, significant impact on climate policy. So just wanted to ask both questions.
Oh, I certainly would welcome a broadening, as you're suggesting, definition of what should be included within this 6 months, the report every 6 months. That perhaps it doesn't need to be a final decision by a federal court, which is the language in the bill. That I think it's better to be broader than otherwise. So I would agree. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you for the bill. That concludes the bill on House Bill 663. We'll turn to House Bill 673, Delegate Aricon, Energy Equality Act of 2026. Delegate, we usually take members of the committee last, but we'll make a special exception for you today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed you guys already. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you yesterday and to bring you this delightful bill that I'm sure some of you will really like. For the record, Delegate Lauren Arkin, Harford County, and I am here presenting HB 673. For those of you who were on this committee before, you may have already heard this bill. This bill is very simple. It does really two main things. The first thing that it does is it gets us permanently out of the California clean car thing. I know we've temporarily stepped away from that, but this would make it a permanent shift. And then it prevents the banning of consumer products based on the source of energy. So think about your lawn maintenance company who is quickly trying to change over to electric because certain areas are no longer allowing them to use their gas-powered things, this would put a halt to that. I won't go through the stuff that I talked about last year. First of all, you guys know about this energy issue. I don't need to preach at you guys about energy. You are steeped in it. But I do just want to, for those who are listening at home, really quick, there's a really great website called gridstatus.io, and it looks very deeply at what's going on in our grid right now. And for those at home, if you don't know, right now, it looks like about 41% of our power on the grid is coming from gas, 30% is coming from nuclear, almost 15% is coming from coal. We are a state that relies on many different sources of energy, primarily non-renewables. And so because in order to turn the lights on, these things are required, we're importing them from out of state, as you all know, I think it is only fair that consumers be permitted to not move to all electric things right now when our grid is actually not being supplied by these renewable things. They're being supplied by fossil fuels, and I think we just need to be honest about that with folks. People believe that if you purchase a battery-powered item or something that plugs into the grid, that you are so green and you're making everything safer, and the truth is that is not real. What's real is that our grid is mostly vastly powered by fossil fuels. And so this bill, I believe, brings our consumers into line with reality and allows them the freedom of choice to pick the products that are most effective. I actually own a gas-powered lawnmower and a battery-powered lawnmower, and I won't tell you which one of your members encouraged me to get the electric lawnmower. He's not currently sitting here, but it's not a great lawnmower. I don't want to lie. It's just not that great. So I'm back to gas, and I want all the consumers in Maryland to have the same opportunity that I did to give a very expensive try to that battery-powered lawnmower that he so vociferously supported, and here he is. However, I am switching back from that one post-haste. So I'm open for questions, and again, I appreciate your hospitality yesterday.
I feel like you're ruining his rep by saying he was for a battery-powered option, but.
Sir, I did not use the delegate's name. I don't know who you're referring to.
Right. Any questions on the bill?
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 673. We'll turn to House Bill, I think it's 701, Delegate Hill, Vernal Pool Wetlands Protection Act of 2026. If you have a panel, please bring them up.
Good afternoon. We'll pull another chair up. Thanks, Mark, let's pull another chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the ENT Committee, it's a privilege to be before you again. I have come to present House Bill 701, Department of the Environment Protection of Vernal Pools. Now, you all know what vernal pools are, right? Because you're experts on all things environmental. And because you have allowed me to come before you for the last several years with legislation designed to help us to reestablish protections for these ephemeral, critical ecosystems that have been the protections that have gone away, frankly, since new guidelines regarding how the Clean Water Act is to be implemented have gone into effect. With the leadership of the chair, we were able to get, without legislation, better definitions of what vernal pools are into our regulations. And what this bill does is it asks, now that we have a uniform definition, that the department simply establish what those protections are. It does not require that they map out all the vernal pools here in Maryland. It does not require anything that's either cost intensive or manpower intensive. And we think it's a very simple bill that just takes us to the next step of establishing what those border protections, boundary protections should be. With that, I am going to tie up my testimony, except to say that once again, the department, who has told us in conversations over the interim that they very much are in agreement with the intent of the bill, they've established that they're somehow going to need, 12 new people to get this done. And I keep thinking that they're not reading the bill, or they're responding to bills from the past, but there's nothing in here that should require anything other than existing resources, and we know that because other states have been able to demonstrate as much. So with that, I'm going to let the experts who can really speak to the issues at hand move forward. So who's next?
Good afternoon again, and thanks again to this committee for your work, and thank you to Delegate Hill and others and co-sponsors for this important legislation. Again, for the record, I'm Maggie Ostall, the Director of Conservation Policy for the National Aquarium. Just to emphasize a few points made by Delegate Hill and from our written testimony, vernal pools are critical to the health of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. More than 700 species depend on vernal pools, including wood frogs, eastern fairy shrimp, and the state endangered tiger salamanders. Vernal pools are ideal breeding grounds for amphibians and the only habitat where certain species can reproduce. Vernal pools act as natural stormwater runoff ponds and help replenish groundwater, free ecosystem services. And now, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to use my remaining time to share some sounds of a vernal pool in Gunpowder Falls State Park. It's from an audio recording on our website that is narrated by the late, great Jack Cover, who was the aquarium's general curator and a renowned expert on amphibians, reptiles, and the ecology of the Chesapeake.
All these trees absorbing tons of carbon, and they're not, one of them sends you a bill for that service. Even though I did this, 50 years ago, starting with it, I feel like every spring, if I don't get out into a pond, put boots on, and then have peepers just wreck my ears, it's like, it's a ritual, and it's never gotten old. It's just like to see these spotted salamanders on the bottom and just, the whole thing. So it's more the fact that it's like spring has arrived. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Jack wraps up the recording after a few more moments to emphasize that habitat loss is the greatest driver of species loss and or the greatest threat to wildlife. And with that, we urge a favorable report on HB 701. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Good afternoon again, committee. My name is Jim Brown. I'm the policy director with Audubon Mid-Atlantic, the regional office of National Audubon Society. Good to see you again. Audubon firmly supports House Bill 701. Protecting vernal pools in Maryland is sound practice for conservation and for saving birds and protecting birds in our state, and for all the benefits that ecosystem benefits that vernal pools bring to Maryland. Audubon has, over the years, partnered with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to identify 44 in what we call important bird areas across the state. And these important bird areas are absolutely necessary for the survival of birds in Maryland, including the 400 species of birds that are found in Maryland and the thousands of other species that may come through Maryland as they're migrating up and down the East Coast. Vernal pools provide birds with habitat, with food, with water. They clean our water, they clean our air, and these vernal pools are found in almost all 44 of these important bird areas across the state. So that's just to stress that these vernal pools are critical components of the landscape. Birds absolutely need them for survival, and the very birds that are part of Maryland's ecological identity and cultural identity, think the Baltimore Oriole, other similar birds, they rely on vernal pools for survival. So Audubon fully supports the intent of this bill, what this bill does to identify and protect vernal pools across the state. It's good sound practice for Maryland conservation, and it's good for everybody else too. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Jenny Hudson, and I am the River Restoration Associate with the Anacostia Watershed Society. Our society has been working for 37 years to protect and restore the watershed for all living and future generations. Our team at AWS works to research these fragile ecosystems. We inventory and map vernal pools of conservation importance within the Anacostia River watershed, focusing on lands in Prince George's County. We have a master naturalist program that trains our neighbors and friends to monitor these vernal pools and gather data to identify conservation and restoration needs. I've seen firsthand people who had no idea about these ecosystems become absolutely fascinated by them. We even had someone feel so inspired they decided to write a play about vernal pools. There used to live a beautiful vernal pool right by our office, which was home to spotted salamanders. But because no one knew that the pool existed, roads were constructed and often oversalted. The pool was destroyed and the salamanders were then found dead. This is a common occurrence as forested areas have been shrunk, leaving vernal pools vulnerable to roads, infrastructure, pollution, and many more things. Yet thriving and biodiverse pools still exist. Our team surveyed BARC, the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, and found 7 vernal pools in just 2 days. This spurred excitement and joy within our local communities, and it's so important to continue to have moments like this to keep available for future generations so they too can become detectives in their own backyard. Given their ecological importance and the pressures they face, we at AWS urge you to support House Bill 701. With this bill, vernal pools can continue to be home for rare amphibians and provide ecosystem services for our local communities. Thank you.
Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and members of the committee, thank you for your time again. I'm Mark Sutherland. I'm the lead for Vernal Pool Partners, which includes these great colleagues here, as well as a total of 18 organizations that are attached to my testimony here, including Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Nature Conservancy, and many local groups such as Blue Water Baltimore. I'll just try to tie this together at the end with a few points. You've already heard about the value of vernal pools. They're extensive. You've heard about the assault on the Clean Water Act from us as well as others today. But you haven't probably heard that the current state wildlife action plan has been developed and includes the protection of vernal pools as a high priority for the state. This is not surprising because all of the northeastern states from Pennsylvania to Maine include some protection of vernal pools. So they're doing it and Maryland should do it as well. So what we've done with Vernal Pool Partners over the last few years with Delegate Hill and other sponsors is to work with the MDs very extensively, many meetings, various revisions to the bill, each time making it easier for MD to undertake this, an action that we think is very cost effective and allows them to proceed at a reasonable pace of their own choosing to achieve this important protection. And I would be remiss if I don't mention the fact that, again, the fiscal note that we see, we think is extremely inflated and I think just inaccurate. And the reason for that is because the states that we've talked about in the Northeast that do this, for example, New York State has a fiscal note that says no impact. And the state of Massachusetts actually has a program just like we've put in this bill, which includes a list that's reviewed. And they say that it takes about 1 to 1.5 staff persons to get it accomplished, not the 12 that is in the fiscal notes. We think that that's inaccurate. The last thing I want to say is when you think about the costs of implementing a program for a very important purpose, you're not considering the plus side, the various things that vernal pools do. They help control stormwater, which is a very expensive endeavor, and they help sequester carbon dioxide as well. So thank you for your time, and I hope you support the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate, for your perseverance on this issue. Any questions from my colleagues? Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Delegate Hill, for bringing this back. I feel like I asked this question before about whether or not DNR's geological survey could help support some of this work. Have you asked them about it?
Absolutely, and I think, Delegate, and thank you for the question, that what we tried to do with the bill this year is say establish a list, not do the work to establish the list. So establishing the list means wherever other entities have identified vernal pools, put them on the list. It doesn't require that the department go out and do the surveys. It doesn't require that they do aerial photography. It's just that once one has been established, add it to your list. And so, yes, the geological survey, anything that already exists, we're just saying, you know.
You're asking them to pool their resources
Just pool your
together.
resources. And
Okay.
then, and extend the protections that you think are appropriate under those circumstances.
And you,
Thank you.
Delegate, do you think if we clarified that maybe they would be more amenable to jump on board?
I hope so.
Okay.
And again, they just haven't been very clear with us about what the issues are with this bill or what language they would prefer to see. But we'd be
Fair.
happy to amend the bill in any way that would get them to understand we're asking them to simply within their normal, going about their normal business, to just make a note of this, so, and to go through the regulatory process of coming up with this. Frankly, even the regulations are already established. They just have to also say whatever buffer zones apply, that they apply for these vernal pools.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Delegate, sorry, who's the they there? You were saying they this, they that. They need to tell us. Who's the they?
The department,
Which department?
the Department of the Environment.
Great, so they're sitting right behind you. So I'm going to do as the speaker does and give you both a little homework. I know Jeremy D. Baker can hear me. Just walk right outside this door after this hearing, and you guys talk outside and figure out what the disconnect is.
Okay.
And then shoot me a text or an email and tell me how we're going to resolve this so we can
Sounds
get this
like a plan.
done. Because I know I've gotten a few texts from people noting this is not the first time we've had this bill before, so I think people would like to see some progress. So,
All right, thank you.
all right, any other questions? Okay, go start your meeting. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 701. We'll turn to House Bill 533. Delegate Stein, Mel Nolan Woodland Incentives and Fellowship Fund reporting. And Delegate, if you have a panel, please bring them up. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, committee members. For the record, Delegate Dana Stein here in support of House Bill 533, which deals with the Mel Nolan Woodland Incentives and Fellowship Fund, which is a fund that's administered by DNR. This fund assists private landowners with sustainable forest management and supports students who are pursuing careers in natural resource-related fields. And also, in a direct way, this fund helps restore the Chesapeake Bay because by supporting restoration of forests or sustainable forestry, it is consistent with our nationally recognized Sustainable Forestry Act of 2009. Now, the primary source of funding for the Mel Nolan Fund is the agricultural land transfer tax associated with forest conversion. The tax is imposed when parcels that are entirely wooded are converted from forestry use to non-forestry use. Then counties collect this tax and remit the proceeds to the state controller, which is then required to remit these funds to the Mel Nolan Fund up to $200,000 annually. Now, for several years, there have been concerns about whether all forest conversion-related ag transfer tax revenues have in fact been deposited into the Mel Nolan Fund. And in response to these concerns, the state auditor issued a fiscal compliance audit of DNR covering fiscal years 2020 through 2023. The audit found that DNR did not adequately ensure that required transfers indeed had been made and found that about $430,000 of the $706,000 owed under state law during that period was not deposited into the fund. The auditor recommended corrective action to ensure accurate transfers going forward, and it also recommended pursuing recovery of the missing funds in coordination with the controller. And DNR has concurred with the auditor's findings and recommendations. So what this bill does is that it builds directly on the auditor's recommendations by establishing a clear reporting requirement to the General Assembly. Specifically, the bill requires DNR to report each year on the amount of ag land transfer tax revenue attributable to woodland conversions that was distributed to the fund, to identify any uncertainties regarding these required transfers, and to explain the steps that are being taken to resolve those uncertainties. And so in this way, it'll help ensure transparency, accountability, and compliance with the code of the Natural Resources article that set up the Mel Nolan Fund. With that, Mr. Chair, turn things over to my two fellow witnesses.
Go ahead, Bill. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm Bill Miles here in support of the bill on behalf of the Association of Forest Industries. There's nothing more than I can add to what Delegate Stein just said.
Well, I'm tempted to say ditto. My name is Gary Allen. I'm the president of the Maryland Forestry Foundation. Our work is partly funded by the Mel Nolan Fund. We work with the state's forestry boards and with private forest landowners across the state. And we've noted for a number of years since our initial incorporation back in the 1990s that the Mel Nolan Fund always seemed to be struggling for deposits because more than half the counties, more than half the time, never reported the sale of any forested land in their county whatsoever. We found that rather remarkable and unbelievable, as a matter of fact. And we continually raised the problem, but it kind of got kicked under the, well, got kicked forward or ignored by the various agencies that were involved in determining these details. We're very pleased that Delegate Stein has stepped forward to help us alleviate this situation and provide us with an ongoing kind of report that we noted that the audit kind of substantiated the concerns that we had consistently raised. And so we think this is an appropriate solution. Obviously, we would like to see restitution of the funds because we think the program has been shortchanged by over $2 million over the past 30 years or so. But we recognize the financial situation in which we find ourselves and are content with a report this time to simply show that this issue can be dealt with, needs to be dealt with, and will be dealt with in the future. Thank you very much, and we strongly support the passage of this bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the bill? Okay, that concludes the bill here on House Bill 533. We'll turn to House Bill 654, Delegate Baylor, Natural Resources Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, Funding and Grants.
Always good to see you, Dana. Got to catch up sometime.
Sure. I'll be around, yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Dylan Baylor, representing District 30A right here in Annapolis. I respectfully request a favorable report of House Bill 654 to most notably increase the funding cap that our heritage areas can receive from the state's share of program open space from 6 to 12 million. This is a reintroduction of a bill that you all heard last session that ultimately passed the Senate unanimously, passed this committee unanimously, and passed the House by a vote of 137 to 1. As you heard last session, our heritage areas do remarkable work across the state to tell our state's storied and complicated history. They do that by investing directly into our local communities and forming critical partnerships. You'll hear a little bit more about that today. Our 13 heritage areas are economic powerhouses, drawing visitors, boosting local businesses, supporting thousands of jobs, and generating over $300 million in tax revenue that benefit communities across the state. This legislation would have the opportunity to grow that significant economic and cultural impact that these heritage areas have. And as we head into the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence this year, and the 400th anniversary of Maryland's formation as a colony in 8 years, I can think of no more important and significant legislation that we could pass to double down on that commitment of telling our state's storied history. This legislation was passed, but ultimately was vetoed by the governor last session. One point that I would make is that I think in his letter he referenced that this legislation could jeopardize some of the goals that our General Assembly has set with regard to land conservation. I proudly, when I was working in the State Senate, worked with Delegate Stein on the Maryland the Beautiful Act to set those goals into law. And I'm grateful that we've met the 30% goal, and we will hopefully meet the 40% by 2040 goal. But I will say that, firstly, this is an authorization, so it increases that cap that could be used from program open space. But I think, secondly, it leads to a larger conversation that I hope that we continue to have in this committee of not just acquisition of land, but also activation of that land and making sure that we are using our state's limited resources to both tell important stories and provide meaningful access to people in a variety of ways to our public lands. One other thing of note is that this legislation, while it is substantially similar to the bill that was passed last session, there is one significant difference that is important to share with the committee, and that is because of the Department of Planning departmental that we already heard in this committee. The bill last year reformed the grant, the monetary amount of grants that could be issued by the Heritage Areas Authority. Last session, we said they could be up to $300,000 and up to 80% of estimated costs for specific projects. This bill just does not include any reference to that, but the Department of Planning departmental that we heard allowed for matching funds to be required. So that's kind of the difference there. With that, I would respectfully request a favorable report of House Bill 654 to provide a meaningful increased authorization here, so that way our amazing heritage areas can continue and expand the amazing work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate Baylor, for introducing this. My name is Jane Cox, and I'm the Executive Director for the Chesapeake Crossroads. I've been in the role for about a year. And thank you to the Chairman and Co-Chair for allowing me to speak today. So the Chesapeake Crossroads Heritage Area, I'm here to support the House Bill 654 and try to share some of the real-world impacts that I've seen from the Maryland Heritage Areas program. In my heritage area for Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, MHAA has supported iconic sites such as the Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse, the Museum of Historic Annapolis, and the Annapolis Maritime Museum grow into important cultural and tourism destinations. Historic London Town and Gardens, now a regional attraction, could simply not exist without the decades of support that MHAA has provided. More than 60 heritage nonprofits in Chesapeake Crossroads, many are community-based and volunteer-run. They rely on this support to build capacity, improve interpretation, enhance visitors' experiences, and in 2026, to share local stories connected to our nation's 250th anniversary. Recent investments highlight this impact. MHAA has supported and contributed to the acquisition and revival of the Elktonia Cars Beach through the Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation. Skipjack Racing, our state boat, by the way, returned to the Western Shore after a hiatus of 30 years last fall. And the Queenstown Rosenwald School in Severn is currently being transformed into a community center and archive. Despite these successes, demand has far exceeded available funding, and only about 30% of my grant requests in my heritage area last year were funded. The current year's requests exceed $1.2 million for strong tourism-driven projects in just my heritage area. So you can see where the existing $6 million cap statewide limits our partners' ability to build on a proven economic development model in the future. So this bill removes an outdated statutory cap without mandating new spending. But as written, it will allow for the responsible growth when state resources permit. I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 654. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Lucille Walker. I am the Executive Director of the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area. I'm a chair of the Maryland Heritage Areas Coalition. I'm a vice chair of Partners of Open Space. We are very pleased and honored to be joined today by the tribal chair of the Piscataway Conoy, Chairman Francis Gray. I'd like him to stand and be recognized. Thank you, sir. Thank you. A great supporter and invaluable to us all. I'm also joined by a number of other heritage areas, which I hope will be allowed to stand and quickly say where they're from, and also other supporters. We're joined online by a number of people as well. I've gotten lots of texts. Maryland is unique in many ways. One of the ways is that Maryland is only one of 2 states in the entire nation that has a state-based heritage area system, and that shows how Maryland values its heritage. The 13 Maryland heritage areas, they touch on all 23 counties and the city of Baltimore. You've heard that we're an economic engine. We are. Maryland heritage areas, as Delegate Baylor said, is very fundamental to the commemorations, the current 250th, as well as the upcoming 400th, just 8 years away. An example of the statewide kind of coalition building and area involvement that we have is the Maryland Liberty Tree Project, which you're going to hear a lot about from a number of people, where a Liberty Tree, a Maryland Liberty Tree, will be planted in every county in Maryland and the city of Baltimore. Very exciting project. And we need, now more than ever, the Maryland heritage areas to flourish. Heritage areas, we share stories of courage. We help pride of place, and we help our communities grow. So I urge a favorable report, and I ask very quickly if Heritage Area could stand and the supporters.
I think, yeah, just stand.
Just stand, okay.
Yeah, let's just each shout out where you're from.
Okay.
Just from my right to left. Sir, where are you from?
Oh, Mike Wickline, Baltimore, representing both Washington County and Baltimore. I'm a video producer and I do a lot of work with these groups, both pro bono and self-paid work.
Great.
So,
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Just say which heritage area you're representing. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Liz Chateau, Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area, Carroll, Frederick, and Washington County.
Amber.
I'm Amber Sanders, Director of Mountain Maryland Gateway to the West Heritage Area, Garrett County.
Gail.
Gail Owings, Stories of the Chesapeake Heritage Area, Talbot, Kents, Queen Anne's, and Caroline counties.
Holly Gilpin, Heart of the Chesapeake, Dorchester County.
Whoever's next to you.
Valerie Woodall with the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area, Richard.
I'm Dan Spedden. I'm the president of the Hagerstown Washington County Convention Visitors Bureau and a full partner with the Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area.
And the shore is in the house today, Beach to Bay Heritage Area, Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset.
Renner Rosario with the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area.
Francis Gray, Tribal Chair, the Piscataway Canoan Tribe, and the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area.
Thank you for allowing
Awesome.
that.
Thank you all for being here. And we will start with questions from Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill, and thanks to your great panel. And thanks to all of the Heritage Area leaders who left their homes and responsibilities to be here today. Your enthusiasm is infectious. We can feel it all the way up here. Thank you for all you do. Delegate, I want to make sure, because I have a little bit of involvement with Program Open Space, which I'm still learning about all the great things that it does, but I'd like to understand how your bill works.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear in Program Open Space every time we meet is about the challenges to the state agencies that make up the program. And, there's just we never have as much, a big pot of resources as everyone needs and deserves. So just to make sure I understand, this bill doesn't decrease the amount of funding to Program Open Space.
So, and I will ask Lucille to chime in as well. If we pass the bill, no, not specifically. But what it does do is it increases the cap that is a part of the current formula in Program Open Space to go up to 12 million. So another $6 million could go to the heritage areas.
Potentially, we're a dedicated byline. I'm the Vice Chair of Partners of Open Space, and I believe in Program Open Space very much. We're a dedicated byline. We're not part of the formula percentage itself. So we have this specific cap on us. And again, the governor would have to, we fall under the governor's office technically, and it would have to be the right time. It would have to be when the transfer tax would allow. We would never want to decrease anyone's programming, only if there was an increase enough that could justify assisting the heritage areas and assisting our communities.
So this is sort of a contingency plan for
Yes.
the glorious day sometime in the future when the Program Open Space budget increases, then a percentage of that increase would go to the heritage area.
Yeah, and I think going back to what I said in my testimony too, I think one conversation that I continue to have is this conversation about Program Open Space being an incredibly important tool for acquisition of both agricultural land easements and also actual land for parkland by the department. And I think there's an important conversation that needs to be had about the activation of that and making sure that people have meaningful opportunities at the same time. And DNR does remarkable work there. A lot of our other agencies do. But as you heard here, and as you see across the state, so do our heritage areas. And if we do come to a time when there's increased availability in the transfer tax, or if there is an interest in providing more meaningful support to the heritage areas, this bill would allow us to do that, the governor to do that in the proposed budget.
Great, thank you. And thanks again to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Lewis, for that EOS question. Delegate Baylor, have you talked to the governor's office? Are we going to have a repeat?
I have talked to them, and I'm pretty sure that the department has not the Department of Natural Resources has not taken a specific position on the bill. And
I don't think they did
they're
last year
neutral.
either, so
Okay.
I'm just wondering, have you talked to the governor's office?
Yeah, I have spoken to them, and I think they are in a neutral posture, not supportive or opposed to the bill. But I will continue to be in conversation with them.
Thank you. I'll do some follow-up too.
Yeah, thank you.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, yesterday we got a pretty powerful letter of support from one of our colleagues, which kind of got me thinking about this issue a little bit more. And I'm just curious, kind of along the lines of what Delegate Boyce was asking. I know that we got pretty far along in this process last year. Are there any things that you could do to maybe help the process? Is there anything else that could help it kind of get across the finish line, other than those conversations of which I know you're going to have? But is there anything that was like brought up specifically that other than the position of the department last year?
Well, I mean, I think firstly we have the opportunity with the bill before us to reiterate our commitment to the heritage areas and to the legislation itself, which I think is the biggest thing. And I'm certainly grateful to Delegate Boucher's continued support on the bill as well. So thank you.
I thought you would be appreciative of that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Delegate.
Okay, I don't see any other questions on this bill, so thank you, Delegate. That concludes Bill House Bill 654. We'll turn to House Bill 665.
Thank you.
Brigida is here on behalf of Delegate Cullison. I know Delegate Cullison is going to be joining us shortly, but I'd like to go ahead and get started with House Bill 665, research facilities and testing facilities that use animals, adoption and reporting requirements. If the sponsor has a panel, please bring them up.
Short. I feel like I'm at the kids' table. I don't know what's going on with this chair. Hello, good afternoon, Chair Corman and honorable members of the ENT Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to present HB 666. I am Delegate Colson's Chief of Staff. Hopefully she'll join us shortly. She's wrapping up another bill she's doing in the Health Committee. This bill prohibits research and testing facilities in Maryland from using traditional animal testing methods, provided that an alternative non-animal test method has received approval or the requirement, sorry, thank you, okay, sorry about that. 665. This bill seeks to ensure compliance with the 2018 legislation, the Beagle Bill, which required any research facility to provide the adoption of any cat or dog used in research that is viable when the research is completed. And when it was passed, the intent was to save as many dogs and cats as possible and deliver them to agencies that would facilitate their adoption. But the bill didn't have any accountability measures, really, and so we're here to fix that, to remedy that gap. Under this bill, entities that are responsible for implementation are defined. Research facilities are those who use live animals for research, education, or experimentation. Testing facilities are corporations, associations, organizations that use animals for testing of any chemical or pharmaceutical product. The original legislation from 2018 required a research facility to take reasonable steps to provide for the adoption of a dog or a cat by identifying a private placement process or a list of animal rescue organizations that could facilitate the adoption. But there wasn't any accountability, as I said, or reporting requirement for the previous law. That issue was remedied in this current bill by requiring each of the defined entities to submit a report to the Secretary of Agriculture, an annual report on the number of dogs and cats used by the entity for the 12-month period and the number of names of the rescue organizations to which the animals were released for adoption. And it goes further in making the same reporting requirements of any educational institute that engages in using animals for research and testing. And the bill adds penalties for non-compliance of this bill. Releasing research animals for adoption is not only the ethical responsibility, but also a compassionate acknowledgement of their contributions to science and society. After years of service, these animals deserve the chance to experience safety, care, and love in a home rather than being discarded once their research purpose ends. By supporting adoption programs, institutions demonstrate respect for animal life, uphold humane values, and build trust with the public. Every research animal deserves a life beyond the lab, defined not by experiments, but by kindness and dignity. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed committee. My name is Mary Hilly, and I am a specialist in the Animal Research Issues Department at Humane World for Animals, formerly called the Humane Society of the United States. I'm here today to speak in support of HB 665, or Beagle Bill 2.0. This bill is a simple update to the original Beagle Bill, which unanimously passed the legislature in 2018 and is now current law. That bill established the requirement that animal research and testing facilities in the state allow dogs and cats used in experiments the chance to be adopted after their time in the laboratory. Now, HB 665 merely updates that current law to require laboratories to report how many dogs and cats they actually adopted out, creating accountability and transparency. The Department of Agriculture then must publicly report an aggregate of this information, further enhancing transparency. Beagle Bill 2.0 is a simple, logical next step to making current law more effective. Thank you for your time and attention. Humane World for Animals urges a favorable report of HB 665.
I just wanted to interrupt for one moment to provide a warm welcome to Vice Chair Cullison. We're glad to have you with us, and certainly if there's something that you feel like you need to add to the very well done testimony that was already delivered, you may do so.
I am just grateful for your time and your consideration and hope that we will get a favorable report. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and you can continue.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Carrie Waters, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Humane Veterinary Medical Alliance. I am a Virginia Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine graduate, licensed to practice veterinary medicine in Maryland, and a Maryland resident. I have a PhD in physiology and experience working with research animals. As detailed in my written testimony, the Humane Veterinary Medical Alliance fully supports the adoption and reporting requirements of House Bill 665 to improve transparency, accountability, and humane treatment for Maryland's research animals. In the interest of time, I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
I'm Thomas Hartung. I'm professor and chair at Johns Hopkins University. I'm directing the Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing. This center was created 44 years ago as the second of its kind in the world and the premier information hub on all aspects around animal experimentation and its alternatives. We strongly believe that the entire life cycle of a laboratory animal, from breeding to ultimate sacrifice or adaptation, requires a culture of care. And adaptation of these precious animals, especially dogs and cats, which are pet animals, which are animals which often take their human owners as more important than their own species, deserve an end of their life, which is acknowledging what they have done for research.
Oh, thank you, and I've already welcomed Vice Chair Cullison to the committee. Did you want to add something to that?
There is one thing that I'd like to add. I'm not sure that that was mentioned. When I had a chance to look through some of the opposition, well, first let me say that I'm very willing to work with my colleagues up here. I know that there's at least one amendment that we're looking for. But also the opposition looks to me like they are justifying the use of animals, which this bill does not speak to that. This bill simply speaks to if you are using them and they are viable upon completion of whatever clinical trial they are doing, then they should be adopted. They should be adopted out, and we should know about it via the bill, what we call it, the Beagle Freedom Bill that we passed several years ago. So this is just an extension of that. Thank you.
Great. There's a couple of virtual panelists. Are they on your panel?
No, these were my.
Okay, great. So we will go to questions. We have a question from Delegate Boyce.
First of all, thank you for this bill. And certainly want to give a shout out to Stacy Holiday, who spent about a half an hour in my office earlier today explaining all this and asking very tense questions. I didn't understand those things. But if I can ask, one, as I understand this, and I'm looking at actually the Humane World of Animals flyer. It says approximately 90 dogs and 30 cats were used in Maryland research and testing facilities that would be required to comply with legislation. So just help me understand, Vice Chair Cullison, that's 390 pets potentially in 2024.
Yes.
So as this bill would work, let's say between the dogs and the cats, there are only 90 of those animals that are post-research adoptable. You want to know that 90 and whether or not they went, and as I understand from Stacy, to a adoption or a shelter or rescue, location, not necessarily in Maryland, but across the country.
Correct. We just want that to happen and know that it's happening. It was required under the first Beagle Freedom Act, but there's been no accountability, so we don't actually know if it's happened.
Okay, so you don't know if it's happened. So right now, you couldn't say of those numbers the percentage that were actually.
No.
Okay. And what is and I think maybe the doctor could speak to that, what is the time frame? Because I understand this is usually beagles, but I'd be interested to know the breed of cats that are apparently used. But what is the life cycle or the time cycle of research using a cat or a dog as it relates to then the end of it and then potentially whether or not they humanely have, I don't know how to say, have made it through these research, whether or not then they are adoptable. I don't understand that process per se. So is it a year that they tend to be under research? They're under research, they're used for research for 5 years, 2 years?
I can tell you for the area of safety sciences, toxicology, and these are the standardized assessments, the maximum is 180 days. Most of the animals go, especially dogs, into 90-day studies, so it's a relatively short period of time, and they have still many years to live.
Okay, so we're talking 180 to 90 days, and depending on the type of research, you mentioned toxicology, is there an assumption, like for instance, using this 390, that potentially the majority of these animals could be rehabilitated and rescued, or is there an assumption potentially, I don't want to assume the opposition, that most of these may not?
This entirely depends on the purpose of your testing. In case of toxicity studies, there's very often a termination of the experiment with the death of the animal necessary because there's damage. A lot of dogs are being used in safety pharmacology, where actually doses are used which are similar to what is used in humans, and they're obviously not toxic and not damaging. And for this reason, these animals can typically be adopted afterwards.
Okay. And then just a quick last question. I know there may be concern that once this, if this bill passes, Vice Chair Cullison, that once those numbers are reported, there may be a somewhat of a, I hate to use the word witch hunt, but a witch hunt to determine whether or not, let's say, again, I'm using this 390, and we said 150, for instance, that were sent to rescue locations and shelters, that we would want to know what happened to those other ones then. But as I understand this bill, you just want to know the number. You're not at this potentially point looking for whether or not the research labs made their own
ethical decision about which animals were viable or not viable, but I don't know how to talk about this, that could be rehabilitated.
Yes, I understand your question, and no, we're not looking for that number. We understand, given the need to use animals periodically, that some will be sacrificed. But what we have learned over the years is that they do not all have to be sacrificed, and actually there's one living in my neighborhood now who was released from, I think it was Hopkins, a beagle. And so, we've learned a lot over the years, and some of the animals can survive well, and Lucy's doing just fine.
Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Creighton.
Thank you so much for this bill. Vice Chair Cullison, animals I love dearly, near and dear to my heart. Point of personal privilege, quick story, but then I have a question. I recently in Panama visited a monkey sanctuary, and all of the monkeys there had been rescued from malaria labs. And it was a remarkable thing to see how well attached they were. So I understand what you're trying to do here. I do have some concerns, and I think to piggyback on Delegate Boyce's question a little bit about making the institution names public, because we do know that there are organizations that will picket those and will target those. Is there a way to protect that information in this bill?
You want to take that?
So right now, we're only asking the Department of Agriculture to report an aggregate of how many dogs and cats were adopted out, not to name individual institutions.
Okay, so the veterinarian's bill was just a misunderstanding, or were there amendments to that bill? To this bill?
No, it was
Just
a misunderstanding.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just
We
wanted to
didn't
hear that
intend to.
again, because I know, I thought I heard you say that to Delegate Boyce, but I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Cullison, for bringing this bill. I really appreciate it, and I support what I think the goals of this bill are. But I do want to ask specifically about that. So as I understand it, the bill requires reporting on an annual basis. What is the purpose for reporting? I mean, if we, are we looking, this kind of goes to Delegate Guyton's question in a way, in a roundabout way. So what are we looking to achieve by reporting these numbers?
So we passed a bill that said it should be done.
Right.
We don't know if it's being done or not. We have no clue, except that I know one dog who was adopted from Johns Hopkins after being experimented upon. But we have no other evidence. And so you will hear in the next bill the interest in, protecting animals in other ways. Right. And there will be a lot of animals that will be surviving. And so we want to make sure that they have that opportunity.
So it's just a way to give us a look back as to whether or not this is being done. But it strikes me that it doesn't inform. If I wanted to adopt these animals, it would be too late in some cases, because it would be a look back, right?
Right, except that if we are reporting it on a regular basis, we know that it's happening. It can be out there in the public that it's happening, and the availability and the opportunity to adopt these animals is present.
Okay, thank you. And if I could ask two related questions, or one related question with two parts. So my question is there any, this is going to sound like I'm, trying to poke holes in this, and I'm not. But are there any, do you feel that there's any obligation to notify the public or notify the rescue organization about any potential lasting effects of animals who survive? That's number one. And number two, are there any scenarios other than the animals were, died or had to be sacrificed? Are there any other scenarios where the animals would not be placed, animals who had gone through these programs would not be placed in a shelter, or a rescue organization?
If they were not viable,
if they were not viable,
sacrificed. So no. And I forgot your first question. My first
question was: Are there any other? is it a problem that there might be some lasting effects if you're encouraging that the animals be put up for adoption?
So any dog or cat that was taken to a rescue would know that this animal has experienced experimentation. And so I'm certain that they would be aware of, the potential needs for that animal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you for the bill.
Thank you.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate and panel, thank you for being here. I do have two questions, and I'll just wrap them all up into one, though, here. So how does this bill work with respect to defense facilities, security-sensitive facilities? I'm thinking specifically around my district, Edgewood Arsenal, Aberdeen Proving Ground. There's an extensive amount of research that goes on there all the time. And if it does apply to those facilities, what's the federal government doing already now with respect to this? Just sort of understand what the entire universe is out there.
So there are registered research facilities with the USDA, which is a different type of registration, and then there are federal research facilities. This bill does not apply to federal research facilities.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, I do not see any more questions. As I mentioned, we do have some virtual witnesses. We'll start with Lisa Radoff, Maryland Votes for Animals.
Hello, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, members of the committee. My name is Lisa Radoff. I'm the President Chair of Maryland Votes for Animals, here in support of HB 665. First of all, I want to say that I was heavily involved in the original Beagle Freedom Act that passed. It was one of the most bipartisan pieces of legislation I've ever been involved with. On the Senate side, having Senator Michael Huff, and then on the House side, having Delegate Kramer. So Ben Kramer. This bill, that bill, when it was passed, I spoke about it as a floor, not a ceiling. It placed absolutely no constraints on research, on the research institutions. It simply asked that the animals be adopted. There was a gap. We heard nothing. We don't know how many animals have been adopted. This bill simply says, please report. And you've heard at length how that reporting works. I'm not going to take up much of your time, but let's do this right. Let's close the gap and let's ensure that healthy dogs and cats can be adopted into loving homes after sacrificing so much on our behalf. I'd like to thank Delegate Cullison for this bill and urge a favorable report. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to Robert Holliker, National Anti-Vivisection Society.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in your committee hearing today. For the record, my name is Robert Holliker, and on behalf of the National Anti-Vivisection Society, we respectfully urge your support of House Bill 665, an important piece of legislation that would promote accountability and transparency in animal research and testing facilities and help dogs and cats find homes after their time being used in experiments. In 2018, the state of Maryland became the 7th state to pass what is commonly known as the Beagle Bill, a milestone in the animal welfare movement, ensuring dogs and cats who have been used and abused in laboratories would have the opportunity to be adopted rather than automatically euthanized after their time in confinement. For many of us, this legislation represented something deeply meaningful, the recognition that these animals, after everything they've endured, deserve a second chance at life. One in a warm, loving home, a life actually worth living. While this law marked a huge victory for animal welfare, it fell short in follow-through by not requiring any transparent reporting. As a result, there is currently no clear public way to measure how many animals were protected and saved with the passage of this law. House Bill 665 addresses that gap. This bill does not create a new or burdensome regulatory system. It simply strengthens existing law by requiring annual reporting. In other words, it ensures accountability, transparency, for a policy Maryland has already embraced. This is a modest, common sense improvement. It reinforces the intent of the original Beagle Bill and ensures that it is working as promised. Maryland has long been recognized as a leader in both scientific advancement and animal protection. House Bill 665 continues that leadership by pairing compassion with accountability. I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 665 and ensure Maryland's commitment to humane policy is not just symbolic, but measurable and effective. With leaders like you, we all, animals and people alike, have a future to look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you both. We have a question from Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again. I wanted to ask for clarification around the Department of Agriculture's role in reporting. Are we assuming that the USDA would report to them and then Ag would report that information? Or is that we would get the information from the federal?
So I believe the facilities receive their annual report back from USDA. That's public information.
Yep.
I believe they will simply submit a copy of that report to the Department of Ag, along with how many dogs and cats
Do they do that
adopted
now?
out. They do not do that now.
So suppose the USDA says we're not sending that to Maryland's Ag Department.
So they wouldn't need to. The
Okay.
facilities could submit that on their own.
Okay, so-
Anyone in this room can get access to those annual reports.
So this is just in the Ag article, but the information would be pulled from the USDA?
I believe so, but we can get clarification
I
on that.
appreciate that.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Okay, that concludes Bill and House Bill 665. We'll now turn to House Bill 666. Vice Chair Cullison, Animal Research Modernization and Best Practices Act of 2026.
Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, I'm here today on behalf of Bo the Bichon, who will do anything for treats, and Murphy the Mischief Maker. Thank you for this opportunity to present House Bill 666 to you and Animal Modernization and Best Practices Act 2026. This bill is reflective of the technological advancements we have made in testing products for safety for human use. It prohibits research and testing facilities in Maryland from using traditional animal testing methods, provided, and this is really, really important, provided that an alternative non-animal test method has received approval or a traditional test method has been waived. And the FDA has been instrumental in making advancements in this area, and they are rapidly developing what we call human relevant testing models that don't include animals. I do want to say that I will acknowledge that there are times when we must use animals, at least in the beginning of the testing. But what this bill does is says we want tests that are that have efficacy and actually will let us know, will predict its impact on people. Currently, animal testing frequently fails to produce relevant and life-saving research. According to NIH, 90% of the drugs, I'm saying it again, 90% of the drugs that pass animal preclinical stages fail when they reach human trials. There are differences between species that contribute to these failures. Even when new drugs that pass animal tests or limited human trials go to market, they sometimes have severe problems with post-approval risk. These risks can have adverse reactions that can lead to hospitalization, disability, or death. And in my written testimony, there are like 4 examples of drugs that this happened with. I can't pronounce them now, so I'll ask you to read them. They were all drugs that appeared safe in human trials, yet caused serious harm to humans. At the same time, it's impossible to guess how many potentially useful drugs have been abandoned because animal testing falsely suggested toxicity. So we probably lost out on some drugs as well. Importantly, we already have better methods. Epidemiological studies, human tissue models, organ and cell cultures have proven invaluable in modern drug and medical research. These methods are especially important in conditions that cannot be recreated in animals. One example of this is something called CIPD, which can cause people to experience symptoms in their arms and legs, making it hard for them to use them. That is a condition that cannot be replicated in animals, and therefore we can't use them to find a cure. Bringing a drug to market already requires decades of research and millions of dollars. The pharma companies like to tell me it costs $4 billion to get a drug to market. Continuing to rely on animal testing almost exclusively is costly and time-consuming, wasteful, and negligent. For example, non-human primates, those that Vice Chair Guyton might have seen, can cost around tens of thousands per animal, in addition to the cost of maintaining the FDA health standards for the animals in the facilities. In contrast, entire organ system chips, it's possible to replicate a liver on a computer chip, can cost as little as a few $1,000s. Alternative methods can reduce development time and cost by years and millions of dollars. HB 666, please disregard the 3 6s. Also, I didn't ask for that. Also addresses transparency within current testing and research frameworks, which lack consistent requirements for documenting and reporting animal use. The bill allows Maryland to better gauge the use of alternative testing methods in facilities across the state. I visited a pharmaceutical company in Montgomery County recently, and I was told that they were all moving in the direction of human-relevant non-animal testing. That was good news. So what this bill does is says, as soon as an alternative is available, then the facility should be using it. And we do give them, I think it's a year to transform their system in order to use it. So this bill represents the next natural progression in moving Maryland towards being a national biotech leader. We're currently playing catch up with states like Virginia and Massachusetts in the adoption of alternative test methods. Embracing efficient, safer, and economical research methods is only the natural next step. Again, thank you for your consideration, and I respectfully request your favorable report.
Hello again, Mary Hilly, specialist in the Animal Research Issues Department at Humane World for Animals. Passage of HB 666 is the next logical step for Maryland to continue its momentum as a leader in promoting the use of the best available science. In 2023, Maryland became the first state in the nation to create a fund that provides grants to scientists developing non-animal technologies, something our state should be proud of. But this is only one step in ensuring that non-animal technologies ensuring animal experiments are replaced with more accurate science. Maryland must now mandate that once these new non-animal approaches are developed, companies producing drugs, chemicals, pesticides, and other products are required to use them. These two concepts go hand in hand. This bill does not get ahead of science, but rather ensures the use of the best science available, methods which should be thought of in terms of their relevance to human biology. This bill prohibits the use of animal tests when the relevant regulatory agency has approved an alternative or granted a waiver from doing the animal test. It also provides some basic protection for dogs and cats used in research. This bill will not be a burden on taxpayers, as its fiscal note reflects no additional costs created by it. Over the last several decades, federal agencies have been actively working to approve data from non-animal test methods. Maryland should now make sure these new technologies are used by industry. This bill will cement our role as a leader in biotechnology, ensure the state is on the cutting edge of scientific innovation, and could encourage additional private investment. Finally, polling shows that Maryland voters strongly support efforts to replace animal tests with alternatives, and I refer the committee to my written testimony, which includes this data. Thank you for your time and attention. Humane World for Animals urges a favorable report on HB 666.
Hello again. My name is Dr. Carrie Waters, and I speak today on behalf of the Humane Veterinary Medical Alliance. I'm a Virginia Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine graduate, licensed to practice veterinary medicine in Maryland, and a Maryland resident. I also have a PhD in physiology. I come before you as someone who has worked inside the research system. As a graduate student in basic science laboratory, I conducted animal experiments under approved protocols and federal oversight. I believe deeply in the scientific mission, and I still do. But working hands-on with animals changed me. I saw research procedures that caused significant pain and stress. That experience forced me to confront a difficult truth. Federal regulatory approval does not always guarantee humane treatment. I'm here to advocate for responsible, modernized, and humane science. First, we must prioritize non-animal alternatives wherever scientifically valid. Advances in organoids and computational modeling technologies are not speculative. They are real tools that can reduce reliance on live animals while often producing more human-relevant data. And second, when animals are necessary, we must require justification for the numbers used. And third, companion animals used in research should not be subjected to unnecessary and cruel procedures such as devocalization. Adoption should be the default for cats and dogs when medically and ethically feasible. And when euthanasia is required, it must follow established humane standards. My experience inside the system leads me to believe reform is not only possible, it is necessary. Science advances. Our policies should advance with it. I respectfully ask the committee to vote yes on HB 666 and improve transparency, accountability, and humane treatment for Maryland's research animals. Thank you.
I'm Thomas Hartung. I introduced myself earlier as the director for the Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing at Johns Hopkins. I'm also chair for evidence-based toxicology, so exactly the type of tests which are addressed in this bill. I'm 62 years old, and the animal tests we're discussing have been introduced when I was not yet born or in kindergarten. And this contrasts starkly with the advance of science. Our scientific knowledge is at the moment doubling every 3 years. We have methodologies like the already discussed organoids, and we call them now microphysiological systems, complex in vitro systems, which replicate organs or multi-organs as patients on chips. Our group has started from here the international society in this field and the world summits, and we have a very good overview that these technologies are mature for use and are in many cases outperforming these animal tests. AI use is exploding. Artificial intelligence can serve as a first layer, making a lot of these animal tests unnecessary because they can filter out many other things. As a young postdoc, some 30 years ago, I developed an alternative to a rabbit test, the rabbit pyrogen test, and it took 30 years to finally save 160,000 rabbits per year with this test. And it takes so long because enforcement is lacking. And the critical step for enforcement is exactly this mandate, to say whenever an alternative method is reasonably available and accepted by experts, it must be used. Because too often we don't leave our comfort zone and just do it as we have always been doing.
Mr. Chair, I think there is a virtual witness, Leon Yee, who is on my panel.
He was not in the virtual waiting room.
He's not there?
Unfortunately, he hasn't entered.
I'm sorry, he has class.
Okay.
So we were.
Sorry, he's in class.
Great. Well, that's a good thing to be doing. Vice Chair Guyton has a
You have his
question.
written testimony.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Cullison, again, for caring about these animals. I have questions about two of the letters in front of us, and I'd like to direct the first one, we have a letter from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and University in opposition, to strict opposition to this bill. And I don't know, Dr. Hartung, if, as a Johns Hopkins employee, if there's something that you can say to us to refute their concerns about what this bill might do to their research.
I mean, first of all, Johns Hopkins is a pluralistic institution, a leading research institution with 7,700 faculty, so there's a lot of different views. Our center is obviously positioned to advance the progress in replacing animal testing, but there's obviously also a lot of animal use, sometimes in discussion with us, sometimes not. I'm not, didn't have the privilege to see this letter, so I cannot comment on it.
So I think is it all right if I continue? I think one of the biggest, generally they're in absolute opposition, but one of the arguments that they discuss is the fact that so much of their federal grant money has been cut, and that this will actually increase the cost of the work that they're trying to do. And also that, according to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, they believe in this letter that it's virtually impossible to make great strides in important medical breakthroughs without utilizing animal models. Do you want to speak to those two things?
I can say one thing. This is about safety testing, and safety testing, to the best of my knowledge, is not carried out at Johns Hopkins. It is biomedical basic research or efficacy testing for possible new drugs, but this is not what is part of this bill for my reading.
Yeah, and just to clarify, institutions of higher education are not subject to this portion of the bill. They only have to report the number of dogs and cats that they have adopted out. So Johns Hopkins would not be affected by the
I think I'm moving ahead to, this is that bill.
This is the bill.
So they are not, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And then the other question I had was, again, the letter that seems, a little bit more in favor, but with some suggested amendments from the Veterinary Medical Association. Have you looked at those amendments, and do those seem like something that would be amenable to you?
I'm very glad that they brought them to me. It was a good point to make around not specifying particular methodologies, but rather relying on the standards of care as they evolve.
Okay, so that's a
yes,
maybe?
That's a
okay.
yes.
Thank
That's
you
a
so
yes.
much.
And I apologize, Vice Chair, if you said this, but HB 6, that Vice Chair down there, HB 665 is included in HB 666, right?
No, they're two separate bills.
I know they're two separate bills, but
Oh.
and the person next to you is nodding. So is the language of HB 665 also in House Bill 666?
If the committee sees that as a viable alternative, I'm happy to do that.
Do you want to answer? The lady to your right.
Yeah, okay.
The requirement to report the number of dogs and cats adopted out is included in 666.
Okay, so it's already in there. Great, thank you. Okay, we do have additional witnesses in person. I believe we have Favorable Morgan Hellman. Are they here? Come on up.
Hello. Good afternoon to the Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, and thank you to Delegate Coulson and her office for this initiative. My name is Dr. Morgan Hellman, and I'm the U.S. Director of Memetis, a biotechnology company in Gaithersburg, Maryland, who develops human-relevant 3D tissue and disease models. With offices in the Netherlands and Japan, we as technology developers have the vantage point to gauge growing international interests in the development of these models, which are computational or cell-based alternatives that have the potential to replace traditional animal models for preclinical safety and efficacy studies used in drug development. As Delegate Collison mentioned, over 90% of drugs fail to pass clinical trials, which demonstrates that currently accepted standards are inefficient predictors of how drugs work in humans, which is not surprising given basic biological differences between humans and animal models. We are not mice. Alternative models not only represent greater human relevance, specificity, and diversity, but also allow pharmaceutical companies to fail fast when their drug candidates aren't fit for humans, which saves billions of dollars in years that can then be transferred down to patients in need of cost-effective and timely novel treatments. These models aren't new per se, but represent decades of technological innovation by biotech developers, academics, pharmaceutical adopters, and government support. This is particularly timely given the FDA roadmap to reducing animal testing in preclinical safety studies, which was published in April of last year, as well as NIH initiatives to prioritize human-based research technologies developed shortly thereafter. The NIH's Complement Animal Research and Experimentation and Validation Qualification Network are paving the way for further industry and regulatory partnerships to make these valid methods. And they are punctuated by the FDA Modernization Act 3.0, which passed the US Senate in December. This regulatory momentum demonstrates the U.S. lead in innovation, which other international bodies such as the European Medicines Agency have used as a landmark for their own initiatives. And likewise, with the support of House Bill 666, the state of Maryland is well poised to set an example as the leader in scientific innovation and secure its spot as one of the top biohubs in the United States for its various stakeholders, its technology innovators, pharmaceutical developers, clinicians, patients, and its animals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do not see any questions. Our other virtual favorable witness is not in the Zoom either, so we're going to move on to an in-person unfavorable witness, Laura Bogley, Maryland Right to Life, if she's here. Going once, going twice. Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 666 and all the bill hearings for today. Colleagues, you've got a link in your inboxes to Volume 2 of our energy primer. This is just all the Maryland-specific presentations we received. And so if you're on the Energy Subcommittee, you got a hard copy in your office. The rest of you got the link, but if anybody else wants a hard copy, just let Mana know and we can provide it. And with that, subcommittee announcements, Chair Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the AAA subcommittee will meet in 15 minutes on Zoom. Thank you.
Chair Stein.
The Environment Subcommittee will meet at 3:15 virtually.
All right, everybody good? All right, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, correction, the